This presentation is going to introduce you to digital illustration. And we're going to start by going over some of the basics that you'll need to know as you begin your journey with us at Graphics. What is digital illustration? It's creating the imagery for graphic work. And it's a super important aspect of both graphic design, digital art, motion graphics, everything that kind of touches on the graphic arts. And they can be done with raster-based software like Adobe Photoshop or vector-based software like Adobe Illustrator. So what's the difference between raster and vector? Raster graphics are things like photographs, PNGs very often, GIFs that are created with something that's based in pixels. So a pixel is a single point on the kind of smallest component or smallest component in a display device. So when I say pixel art, you always have this like impression of this very exaggerated kind of grid looking graphic. And that's exaggerating the style that can happen with pixels. Pixels are great because they let you do a lot of things, but a lot of times vector is more appropriate and more versatile because it stays really sharp and you can, it'll stay really clear whether you can make it super large or super small. And they work differently. So while the pixels, it's more like kind of painting with these dots or squares, drawing with vectors is different because you're creating a shape that's defined by geometry. It's defined by these actual points, these anchor points or vectors and curves to create the graphics. And it's important to know when to use which one. If you're getting paid to do a logo, you really want to be able to do it as a vector graphic so it's super versatile for whatever they might need to do with it. If you're working with a lot of typography, it's important to do vector. And if it needs to be scalable, like we were saying, where it can get really large, really small. But if you want to do something that's more free form, you want to be digitally painting, you have a lot of layers and details, and you want to work in a way that's more connected to kind of traditional art materials, raster programs are going to be more what you enjoy using. But for this class, we're going to be focusing primarily on vector design because it's so crucial and it's so helpful to the world of graphic art and graphic design. Here's an example of some styles that kind of emerge from vector graphics versus raster graphics. And some more examples. And then looking at this graphic of logos, you'll see that these were all done as vector graphics. So none of this is done in something like Photoshop. This is all created in something like Illustrator. So what are some important terms that you need to know to understand working with digital illustration? This is some important vocabulary that we're going to go through on these next slides for you to kind of have at your disposal so that you understand, when we're giving demonstrations and how to communicate about your work. A raster graphic is going to be that one that's made out of pixels. So this is going to be like these really closely spaced rows of dots that form the image. You'll also hear it called a bitmap. It's created with this square grid of pixels that you don't really see unless you zoom in or you exaggerate it or it's low resolution. And it's a type of graphic that's resolution dependent. So it cannot scale infinitely. You'll start to lose quality as you get it bigger. A vector graphic is created by points on a plane, so it's connected by lines and curves, and you can scale it without losing quality as long as you export it right. Next is anchor point and path. Anchor points are those points that are defining the path, which is the shape. So you've got your points, and then that line between there is the path. So when you close that shape, or when you close a path, you tend to get a closed shape. Anchor points have control handles that let you adjust the curve and the shape as you start working with it. So this will make more sense as we start going. And there's a really fun game here that you can play to practice your pen tool skills. Bezier are these
kind of curves that can be scaled indefinitely, and they're very smooth curves based on the parametric curve that was created when designers were making the Renault cars in the 1960s. There's a great game here for you to play with kind of understanding how the Bezier curves can work. Stroke is the path or line that defines a shape, defines text, any kind of lines that you see in graphic arts are called strokes. And so you'll hear things about like stroke color, you'll hear things about stroke weight, and weight means the thickness of the line. So when you see those options in your software to adjust, that's what that's called. And it's important to remember which one is which. So when we're giving directions, when you're trying to find the right settings, that you know where you're going. Fill is the area created by closing a path. So the fill color would be the inside color of a shape or an area, opposed to the stroke, which is the line. When we say transform, that means we're changing a shape's size, placement, or rotation. Scale can also be used to describe something's changing its size. Export is when we convert a file to another type. Source files are types that are specific to a software. So like when you have a PowerPoint file or a Photoshop file, that's what we call source files. And they usually need to be exported into another kind of file type so that people can read it without that specific software. And when you export a file or you have different file types, the group of letters that occur after the file name indicate that file format. So you'll see like .pdf, .jpeg, .gif. That's telling you the kind of file, and that's called an extension. So what you're going to do next is you're going to practice working with Boxy by following this video. So make sure you watch it, and I show you how to kind of go around, where some of the basic tools are to get started. And then after you watch that video, I want you to try to do each of these following things. So you're going to try to create at least 3 different shapes using various shape tools. Try to use some of the more complex ones, not just the simple ones. I want you to experiment with changing the stroke and fill colors of those shapes. I want you to try to transform the shapes using the Edit tool, adjust anchor points and nodes on a shape, and try using the Polygon tool. All of that is going to be stuff that I show you in that video. And when you're done, I want you to screenshot it and turn it in on Classroom. Have fun.